Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture we're going to set up our EC2 instances, and we're going to use these EC2 instances for the rest of this section of the course, and we're basically going to look at all the different routing policies available to us and how they interact with our EC2 instances. So this is a lab and you will need to log into the console. Okay, so here I am, I'm logged into the AWS console, and I want you to take a note of which region you're in. So I'm in the London region because I'm based out of London, and I want you to select the region that is closest to your physical location. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go over to services and we're going to go to EC2, and we're going to provision 2 instances in the region that's closest to you, and we're also going to provision an elastic load balancer. So let's go ahead and launch our instance. I'm going to use the Amazon AMI, Linux AMI, and we're going to do a T2 micro. And then in here, we're going to leave everything as default, except we're going to pass it a bootstrap script. Now, this is available in the resources section of the course, and I'll quickly just run through what the script does. Okay, so here is our script. So we've got our shebang and our path to our interpreter, /bin/bash. First thing we're doing is we're updating the operating system. Then we're installing Apache. Now we're using version 2.4 because it's the latest stable version of Apache. So that's all that 2.4 is. And then we're starting the Apache web service, so it becomes a web server. And then we're making sure that when this EC2 instance reboots, that the HTTPD service comes back on. So the Apache service comes back on. And then in here, we've just got a simple HTML page. So it says, hello Cloud Gurus, this is X. And then we're outputting that to our var www HTML directory, and we're writing it to index.html. So all I want you to do is just change this X. So we'll call this web server 1, and perhaps even the region. So this is London web server 1. And I want you to just copy and paste this script and put it into EC2. Okay, so we're going to paste the script in here. We're going to go ahead and hit next to add our storage, go ahead and next add our tags, and we're going to call this, we'll call it London Web Server 1. Go ahead and configure your security groups. Just use an existing security group of MyWebDMZ, one that you've set up earlier, so it just has to have HTTP open to the world as well as SSH. Go ahead and hit review and launch, and go ahead and launch this EC2 instance and use your existing key pair if you've got one. So go ahead and launch those instances. I'm going to do it all over again, but we're going to create London Web Server 2. So I'm going to launch my instance. In here, I'm just going to go in and use Amazon Linux AMI, T2 micro, and again, we're in our advanced details, paste it in, but then change your London Web Server 1 to be London Web Server 2. Go ahead and hit next, add your storage and your tags. So we'll call this London Web Server 2. Okay, and we'll use the same existing security group. So we'll use MyWebDMZ, review and launch, and go ahead and launch that, and then just acknowledge that you've got access to the private key. And so there we go. We are now launching our 2 different EC2 instances. They're going to run a bootstrap script, and they're going to create a simple little web page that says, I'm London 1, I'm London 2. What we want to do now is just create an elastic load balancer to put these behind. So go over to load balancers, create a new load balancer. Let's just do a classic load balancer and go ahead and hit continue. And then we're just going to do it on port 80, so for HTTP. Assign our security groups. We need to put in our load balancer's name, so call it my London ELB. And go ahead and add our security groups. I'm going to put it in the same security group as my EC2 instances. And then I'm going to go and just configure a health check. We called it index.html. In terms of the healthy threshold and unhealthy threshold, let's just make this an interval of 10 seconds. And then we're going to have an unhealthy threshold of 2 and a healthy threshold of 3. So basically 30 seconds between when this would come up and it being live on the elastic load balancer. Go ahead and hit next. And we're going to add our EC2 instances. So just add them both in there and go ahead and hit next. For tags, you don't really need to create any tags. Just go ahead and hit review and create, and now hit create. And so now we have our elastic load balancer that we've created in the region that's closest to us. So that's, for me, it's in London. And we have 2 EC2 instances that are sitting behind it. Now, I want you just to test this by copy and pasting the IP address and then just opening that up in a separate tab. Okay, so I've just pasted in the IP address here, so you can see 52.56.56.128, and it says, "Hello Cloud Gurus, this is London Web Server 1." And so now I'm going to get my Web Server 2, copy and paste this in, so it's ending in .52, just going to paste it in here, and we should get, "Hello Cloud Gurus, this is London Web Server 2. And then another thing we just want to test is our DNS resolution. So if we go back to our Elastic Load Balancer, we can see here it's classic. If we just look at the instances, make sure that they're healthy and in service, which they are. So you can go back to your description and just paste in the DNS name. So it's my London ELB, and paste that in there. And then when you visit this Elastic Load Balancer, it will alternate between 1 and 2. If you do a hard refresh, you'll see it's being balanced equally between the two. Okay, so we've set up 2 EC2 instances behind an Elastic Load Balancer in the region that's closest to us. One last thing that we need to do now is we need to go over to a region that's as far away from you as physically possible. So for me, I'm probably going to use Sydney, because it is over the other side of the globe. So I want you to think of a region that's completely at the other side of the planet to you, and we're going to go in and we're going to create one EC2 instance, and we're going to create one Elastic Load Balancer as well. Okay, so here I am in the EC2 console. I'm going to go over to Sydney, click on there. I don't know if I've ever used the Sydney region before in this account, so I might not have my private keys and security groups set up, but we'll have a look. So no, it's all by default. So I'm going to go ahead and launch an instance. I'm going to use the Amazon Linux AMI. I'm going to use a T2 micro and go ahead and configure my instance details. Now this bootstrap script, we're going to paste in the bootstrap script. So I've pasted it in here, and we just want to change the name. So instead of "Hello Cloud Gurus, this is London Web Server 1, we will say this is Sydney Web Server 1. Go ahead and hit next. And then in here, we're just going to leave it as all default. So we're just going to call it Sydney Web Server 1. Go ahead and hit next. And we're going to create a new security group. So we'll just call it Sydney DMZ, Sydney DMZ. And we'll do that for the same description. And then I'm going to add in port 80 in here. And that's it. And you'll notice now that with your CIDR address ranges, it's doing it in both IP4 and IP6. That's very recent, so it's quite interesting. We'll go ahead and hit next, and go ahead and hit launch. And then in here, I don't have an existing key pair, so I'm going to create a new one, and I'm just going to call it my Sydney key pair. And I'm going to download that, and I'm going to go ahead and launch my instance. So there we go, we have launched our Sydney instance. So go ahead and view those instances, and now all we need to do is create our Sydney ELB. So click on Load Balancers down here, hit Create Load Balancer. I'm going to use a classic load balancer again, and then I'm just going to go in, leave everything as default. We'll call this my Sydney ELB. Go ahead and assign our security groups. So we're going to use that security group that we just created. So go ahead and hit next. And we'll go ahead and configure a health check. Again, I'm going to change the intervals down to 10 seconds, and I'm going to change the healthy threshold to 3, so it comes up within 30 seconds. And now I'm going to add my EC2 instance, which is up and running, and I'm going to click in here, and going to go next, add our tags. I'm just going to leave that and go ahead and hit create. So we've now created our Sydney Elastic Load Balancer, and we've put our EC2 instance behind it. So what you want to do is just go in and check that your, the bootstrap script has run successfully. So copy the public IP address, and then just open up a new tab and paste that in. And I pasted it in, and it took a little bit longer. I actually beat the bootstrap script in terms of trying to resolve that address. So do give it a couple of minutes, but there you go. It says, "Hello Cloud Gurus, this is Sydney Web Server 1. Okay, so now we have, we just want to double check one last thing. If you go back to your EC2 console, let's just make sure that our load balancer has the EC2 instance in service, and that we can resolve the DNS name. So I'm back in London for some reason. Hang on, I'll just go back over to Sydney, click over here, go back to my load balancer. So here's my load balancer, and we just go over to instances, and you can see here, it says it's out of service, so I still need to probably wait another 30 seconds. And there we go, just refreshed it, and now it's back in service. And the next thing I just want to double check is that I can resolve my DNS name. So I'm just going to copy and paste that into a new tab, make sure everything's working, and there we go. So right now we've got 3 EC2 instances around the world, 2 in the region that's closest to you. They're behind an elastic load balancer, and we've got another EC2 instance in a region that's on the other side of the planet to you, and it's behind an elastic load balancer. And so now we're ready to start the Route 53 part of the course. So if you've got the time, join me in the next lecture. Thank you.